I was an educator for nearly 20 years, but I worked with little people. No one could ever have told me that I would have been stood in front of such an esteemed group of leaders and educators from higher education around Europe and around the world. So if you don't mind, what I need you to do this morning is, if you think something's funny or interesting, in order to make me feel at home, I need you to react as if you were 5, okay? You know, it's extraordinary when you think about it. We are born the ultimate learning machine. You know, there's research available that will suggest that we learn somewhere between 70 and 75% of everything we learn in our lifetime before we're 5 years old. And I'm not talking about stuff, but you think about the complexity of what we master in those first 5 years of life. We learn to walk and talk, most of us. We learn to understand vocal intonation, facial expression, body language. We learn to absorb and understand the sensory joys of the world around us. And all of that happens before somebody tells us we have to sit down and learn from experts. That one of the reasons we're seeing such extraordinary decisions being made politically in so many places around the world is because we're watching a reaction of people who were trained to seek out certainty in their lives, who were promised and educated to believe in certainty. Do this and this will happen. Do this and this will happen. Do this and this will happen. And if you do all of that stuff, you've got a life that is pretty much guaranteed to be okay. And increasingly, around the developed world, people are saying that's not true anymore. So what they're doing is they're blaming the establishment, and that's where I think so much of this is coming from. A reaction because we were educated to live in a certain world, and actually that doesn't feel that way anymore. And partly the problem there is we have always been educated to believe that there are systems and structures that will solve the problems we face. And all we need is to wait for the experts to come along and give us the gift of the system or the structure or the new idea. Now, in this new world, in this world of imagination, in this world of open-ended thinking, of opportunity, a remarkable opportunity unfolds in front of us. One of the things I urge you to think about over your 3 days here together, of learning, of sharing, of collaboration, of drinking the occasional glass of wine, is that what we make sure we do as we audit the processes we're going through is that we don't, in our own mindsets, think to ourselves, am I just looking for the silver bullet? Am I just looking for the quick fix, the easy answer, the strategy that somebody else has evolved and is going to present to me? Are we really talking here about a culture shift that will lead to a greater sense of empowerment, of involvement, of opening our minds to the possibilities of a 5-year-old? You see, the danger is this. We live in this culture, I think, and if you were honest with me, I wonder how many of you have lived through hundreds of silver bullets in your institution. Let's be clear here, by the way. You're having a wonderful time here, but your colleagues will be dreading you going back next week. You know this. Because they will be sat there in the scheduled meeting going, what are we going to be expected to change now? And how long before it ends up in the cupboard full of great ideas with clever names that exist somewhere in our organization? And you see, here's the problem. We're living in this world where we have lurched so far from feeling proactive, design-driven, culturally led, to one where so much of what happens in our organizations feels reactive. Now, the thing about change is people find change sexy and cool and exciting if they feel they're at the leading edge of it, if they're driving it. if it's proactive. People resent change if they think it's reactive. And sadly, it seems to me that the accelerated nature of the world means we spend far too much of our time these days, particularly in leadership and management positions, reacting. And that creates a hugely negative culture when you're talking to people about change, and even, God forbid, imagination. Because the first reaction they'll have is, we don't have time. Where are we supposed to do that on top of all the other silver bullets we're currently dealing with? So let's also make sure over the next 3 days we put through the lens the idea that when we're talking about developing real ideas based on imagination and passion and vision and belief, that we're not talking about quick fixes, that we're actually talking to each other about how do we begin to shift that culture. Because we have to shift the culture in our organizations if we're genuinely going to get people to move forward. When you're dealing with a complex situation that's potentially going to lurch into disaster, most of us were taught from a very early age, and by the way, this is the point at which things tend to go wrong, that if we don't know something or we can't do something or, God forbid, we fail at something, it's because we weren't trying hard enough. Think back to your childhood and the number of times that you were told off if you didn't understand something in a class lesson, and the teacher would say, but you weren't listening properly. Or you don't get the grades in a test that you or your family expected you to get, and people say that's because you didn't spend enough time working. So from a very young age, we're taught that if things go wrong, it's because we weren't trying hard enough. Now, this is crucial, because the other thing that happens in people's mindsets when you mention change to them is not change at all, but you are going to get me to work harder then. And that isn't what change should be about. We keep trying to reinvent the same systems, the same structures, the same mindsets. We use the same approaches, and we marvel when these things don't work. And partly for me, it's because you cannot change anything until you change your culture, until you create a culture where change feels proactive, where people feel involved, where it doesn't feel that it's about just doing the same stuff but more intensely, or just giving it a different label. So to me, that's what is going to be required over the next 3 days, for you to translate your dreams, your imagination into reality. Thank you so much.